Welcome to the Author Entrepreneur Podcast, where I interview authors and entrepreneurs on their books and their businesses. My name is Stacy Matson, and I'm the author of Bucket List Living, Living Your Purpose, and owner of Bucket List Unlimited. Today, I have Tej Stouffer here from Fascination Films, and he's going to talk about some of his books he's published through his company and some of his films documentary films he's filming.
Yeah. Thrilled to join you, Stacy.
Thank you.
I'm delighted to join you today, and perhaps different than some of your guests, I am an author, and I was first published when I was in the third grade in the Iowa
Wow.
Writer's Almanac. I had a poem called "The Goat in the Boat." So it was a real banger, and I've been writing and um, doing things that are in the overall storytelling space, media, marketing, communications, events, experiences. I know all my life. My dad was in the publishing business, and I can share a little bit about my story, but I've been doing this stuff all my life. My most recent success was really not as an author, but as a publisher and editor and publisher of the book Killing Kyle Orris. So we can talk about that. It's an amazing story. And also, I just think there's so many ways for storytelling to happen, including this medium of podcasting and dialogue and discussion, like what we're doing. It's a really cool way to tell a story because there's this interaction of two people, that doesn't happen in the one-way interaction that happens, in some of the other media. So a lot of ways to tell a story, but the primary way I do it is as a documentary filmmaker, and then I own a publishing company in addition to that.
Nice. What is the name of your publishing company?
Acorns and Oaks, and it's a subsidiary of Fascination Film Studio. So, really, I'm a filmmaker first, but then in the process of doing that, and particularly the kinds of films that I make, and we can talk about that, but in the kinds of films that I make, it ends up that people are like, well, what if there was a book companion to this? And it works in reverse more often than somebody has a book and they're like, man, what if this was a movie? And so right now I'm in the process of adapting two books into documentary films. And I'm about to have a meeting tomorrow with a guy who is debating between which comes first. Do we tell the story first as a documentary or do we tell the story first as a book? And he's already written a manuscript. So we'll figure that out.
Yeah. So how do you choose which stories to make into documentaries?
That's a good question. One of the things is, what's the nature of the person? Are they a person who the cameras are going to freak them out? They're going to be freaked out the whole time. Every time you bring out a camera, they freak out. Well, that's not going to work. Set them down behind a computer and get them writing, or work with a ghostwriter or something like that. There's lots of ways to write a thing. So can we film this person? That's one component of it. Most people are willing to get comfortable around a camera, but just some people can't get over that hurdle. The second thing is, do we have the assets to tell this story visually? So in some cases, you don't, like they have a phenomenal story, but I only do documentary style work. So there's no actors, no recreates, no AI, no animation. I shouldn't say no, because sometimes we'll use a little bit of animation or something like that. But for the most part, I want real things. And so
Right.
sometimes people have phenomenal stories, but there's just no media to go with that story, in which case you kind of have to write it out so that or you would have to do a scripted piece. You would need actors and recreate. You'd have to recreate all those scenarios. That's a way bigger project. It's really hard to get that right? And so sometimes they do have the assets, though. And a lot of the types of filmmaking that I do, heritage and legacy films and some of that kind of stuff, you have old 8mm, old VHS, you've got photo albums, and the person can be describing that thing, and you have something you can put on screen that somebody can watch? And so those two things, can we film this, or are there people who can tell this story on film? And do we have visual assets to help tell the story. And you only need so many, you know?
Where can people watch the documentaries? Like, is it on Netflix or Amazon Prime or just on your website? Like, how do people access those?
Yeah, it's so variable, right? This is the really interesting thing. So I'm gonna answer your question because it's a good question. But you get to this other question, this other thing, which is like when we talk about documentary filmmaking, we all automatically put ourselves in the seat of the audience. We think of documentaries as this thing, or films, movies, as this thing we watch.
Mhm.
Very, very, very few of us ever imagined that we would be the subject of one. But Fascination Film Studio comes from the, like, I named Fascination Film Studio because I'm fascinated by people, but there's a fascinating story hidden behind every door. So let's tell yours. Like, people would never, and the other things, just like in the like in what you do and talking about authors, we know a lot of people who they'll tell a fascinating anecdote about their life, and somebody will be like, "You should write a book." You know what? You should write a book. We'll say that. You will have heard that. We've all heard that. We've probably all said it. Maybe people have said it to us. You know what? You should write a book. It's so rare that somebody would say, "You should make a film about that." Somebody should make a film about that. That's way more rare, but actually, it's equally accessible. Like, and frankly, we all consume a lot more video content than we consume written word. Most of us,
Yeah, that's
most of
true.
us. So it's, for a lot of people, they're going to spend $5,000, $6,000 to get a book out in the world. If they use a ghostwriter, they're going to spend $30,000 to $50,000. Gosh, you can make a documentary for that for sure. Like, you can make a documentary for $5,000. My floor right around here, just local heritage and legacy pieces, is $3,500. Most people will spend more than that bringing their book to market. So it's kind of equally accessible. And every movie or documentary or whatever we've ever watched, it's about somebody. It might as well be us.
Right?
So one of the like drum beats that I have is for us to think of ourselves as consumers of that stuff, for sure, viewers and audience, but also it shouldn't be outside the realm of possibility that we might actually tell our story that way. And I'll tell you a story about that in a minute, but if you're interested. But what I would say to answer your question is you could see my stuff in a lot of different places. By the time this podcast goes to air, I think I'll have something on Amazon Prime. So I contributed to a piece that'll be on Amazon Prime Video starting on May 1st about the Military Basketball Association. I
Interesting.
know. I know. Who knew, right? That's what makes a great documentary. You're like, I didn't know that was a thing. And then you watch the documentary and you know all about the thing, right? And so the Military Basketball Association, actually, every Memorial Day, the championship airs on CBS Sports, right? But
Who knew?
who knew? Well, I guess
And
all
I'm an
those people.
Army veteran.
So there are 1,000 players in the Military Basketball Association, and the bases compete against each other. So it's amateur basketball, but it has a lot of components, and the core of it is mental health and suicide prevention. We need outlets. We all need outlets, right? People in service, you know this, and we all know this. Like, people in service need healthy outlets to deal with stress and the stress and pressures that are presented in particular to people in military service. And so the driving force behind it isn't the game. It's a mental health services thing for people who would say, you should see somebody. You ought to see a counselor. I mean, I don't know. You want to go play some basketball? I would go play some basketball. And then the coaches become these kind of de facto counselors, right? And also just the activity of playing. It's good for our bodies to move our bodies, good for our brains. And so Military Basketball Association is doing all that. It's a really cool program. Most people don't know about it. And so it's actually a docu-series about it. So it's a docu-series. I edited episode 2. So when episode 2 rolls around, or if you binge it, when you get to episode 2, I edited that one. And that's how a lot of production works. You have like a few production companies working together on projects like that. Emilio Media is the lead production company on that. Fascination Film Studio backed them up to help get this thing on air on deadline. So um some of my stuff shows on YouTube, some of it's like film festival stuff. Some of it is Stacy, I have a film I'm working on right now. Probably only 20 people will ever see this film.
Why?
And it's a film about a man, and I won't say his name, but he's dying. And his family immigrated to the United States from the Netherlands. And they were part of a closed Dutch culture. So he was raised in something kind of like being Amish. They really weren't allowed to participate with people outside their very conservative church. And they went to a school that was within their religion. And um, he's the only one who's still alive who knows the stories, the family stories. But he's dying. And his family knows this. And it's so important to them to hold on to those stories for the sake of the generations that will come. And they also have a later in life baby who's just come. And so they know my kid will never really know grandpa.
Mhm.
But we want to record this now that we would be able to hand on these stories through the generations. How will we maintain this generational legacy? And how will we build this generational staircase that each generation builds on the one before it? How do we not repeat the mistakes of the past, but how do we maintain the successes of the past? And the way we do that is by recording our story. A lot of ways to do it. You could do it in a journal or a book or a diary. I think that a film is a really great way to do it. So a lot of the work that I do is heritage and legacy in nature. And a lot of times people do want those to be like on YouTube so family members can just search it up. Like, where was that thing about grandpa? Like, can we just search that up on YouTube? But some people, like this family, are very private.
Mhm.
And it's totally worth it because they know that they'll have a tool for the inevitable grief to come. And every day they could play it if they wanted. And so some of my stuff nobody will see. One of my favorite films, The Last Harvest, was just in a film festival last weekend. It was 2 weekends ago. It was the Farm to Film Festival, which is why I'm just growing back in my beard after this fun cowboy mustache. But I was in the Farm to Film Festival with a very personal film for me, uh, The Last Harvest. And it's very personal for me because I make these heritage and legacy films for families and companies and communities. And I do other kinds of work like that military basketball thing and some other films I'm working on. But this film, this gets on to like, where will this be seen? This film is about my family, my wife's family. They're farmers who farmed this one farm in north central Iowa for 111 years. This one family, year after year, 4 generations of this family farmed this farm. And dad's 85 now. He's actually not done farming, but that farm is the farm he grew up on, but he lives 11 miles from there. And it's just getting too hard to get down to that farm and move the equipment down there and all that stuff. So he wouldn't be farming it the next year. This would be the last time that a rooter would harvest this farm. So we came and brought the cameras and we filmed the last harvest. And then we used that as a look back that the brothers and sisters that are still living, we did interviews with them, all the kids, we did interviews with them, put it together in this feature length documentary about that. And then, at Christmas time, this last Christmas, we told mom and dad, hey, don't plan. Everybody comes back to the farm for Christmas. We all know how this works. Family gets back together. We're all going to come together at Christmas time. It's going to be so sweet. And we said, don't plan anything for this one afternoon. We want to watch the movie. And they said, okay, great. So then at lunch, we said, hey, get yourselves presentable because we're going to watch the movie. And they're like, why would we get presentable? We're just going in the living room. And we said, well, because we're going to Clarion. They're like, why would we go to Clarion? And we said, well, because there's a movie theater in Clarion. And they were like, what? It's what? And we had rented the theater. And we
Oh,
had
that's
told
awesome.
everybody in their church and the old farmers that dad has coffee with every morning and the town, this little tiny town and all the family, like the 4 generations. Everybody filled the theater and we did the red carpet and made the concessions free, and so there's drinks and the popcorn, and they couldn't believe it. And like near the end of their life, they're in their 80s, near the end of their life, they got this moment of transitioning the story to the generations and a celebration of their life while they're living. But
Right.
then I put it on YouTube, and so it gave them that gift, right? This gave them that gift. So where it started, where will this be seen? Well, maybe the Clarion Theater in Clarion, Iowa, one time. But then I put it on YouTube, and it's not optimized for YouTube or anything. It doesn't have any of those clickbaity titles or a perfect thumbnail. It's a documentary about my family, right? And their little town, they live out in the country, but the town near them has 700 people in it. And every day for like 3 weeks, a Kanawha's worth of people watched the film, and they couldn't believe it that every day 700 or 1,000 people were watching this film about them. It just, they couldn't fathom it. And they said, they're just simple people. And they were like, it just boggled their mind. And in the end of their life, in these later years of their life, it kind of gave them the gift of significance, that their life mattered to people, that it mattered to someone, that their story mattered to somebody. So I think that's why people do it. So you could see it on YouTube, or some of my stuff shows on Amazon Prime, and you might see it on Netflix. I'm working on a documentary about Brazil that'll be everywhere. And some of it will be seen by 20 people. Some of my films for companies are shown on little kiosks when you walk into their thing. Some of the films, are used for sales tools. Some of them are used as advertisements. They're micro docs that are 1 minute long, and people use them as advertisements on Facebook. Like it could all show up anywhere. It just depends on what the audience for the film is. So that's a lot of talking, but there's a little bit on some of that filmmaking stuff.
That's amazing. I think everybody should celebrate their life every day, and celebrate it before you die, right? So I think what you're doing is amazing
No,
for one
thank you.
thing. So
Thank
yeah.
you. Yeah, something to be said about a bucket list item, right? Or a bucket list experience, and recording a bucket list experience. That's part of it too, right?
Yeah. I was amazed at what you said the cost was, because I agree. Like, that's totally reasonable. I mean, I spent more than that on publishing my book. So,
Right. Yeah, people wouldn't
so
think
yeah.
it. People
Yeah.
wouldn't think it. Now, we should also scale that sort of thing. So if you've
Right.
seen a big famous documentary, some of these documentaries that are like really big, really famous, Nat Geo, Planet Earth, some of these documentaries are, really big documentaries, the types of documentaries that get a national theatrical release, those are certainly over $1 million. If you think about like the really good ones on Netflix, I have a friend who he got last year. He had the number one documentary on Amazon Prime Video. It's still out there, and it's called Chiefsaholic. Super cool documentary. It's about this bank robber who's a big Chiefs fan, and it's a true story, and it's an unbelievable story. That cost over $1 million. Like that was an expensive documentary to produce. So it's not that you can't spend $1 million making a documentary. You absolutely can. If you think about films that you watch, stuff you watch, like if you watch HGTV or the History Channel or Nat Geo during the day, not at the nighttime when they have their really big productions, but think about the stuff that's playing when you're sitting there waiting for them to put tires on your car. The screen, and they're putting the tires on the car, and it's those ones. Those are like $100,000 an episode. That's like how much it costs, between $80,000 and $120,000. That's how much it costs to produce that type of television. The stuff I produce is about at that level. It's at like national broadcast level, but it doesn't look like the evening programming that's like 7-figure projects, right? The stuff I do is professional. It's shot with cinema cameras. It looks like that. Most of my work costs between 10,000 and 50,000. I do local work for 3,500 to 5K if it's a family documentary. Or some of my stuff's less. Sometimes it's like I just need a little 1 minute thing. Can you come film this thing? I'm speaking. I'm gonna do one next week. I'm just a speaker. They're gonna do a speaking engagement. They need it edited. They need a little demo reel. It's a few $1,000.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Can you tell us a little bit about your books and your publishing side, like the authors you work with and that kind of thing?
Yeah, absolutely. The book that's out right now is called Killing Kyle Orth, and this is worth this is a story worth telling. So I'll tell the story in a minute, but I'll answer your question first. So I do a hybrid publishing model where I think all your listeners, all our viewers will know this, right? You got and you've talked about this, like you've got national, traditional publishers. They extend a publishing deal. They'll pay you for rights to your book. You work for them now, and they're going to put your book out. And then hopefully you might earn past your original buyout and start making money on your book. That's really only available to famous people. Like if you don't have a platform these days, there's no manuscript they're going to buy. Like you have to be famous already, or it is not going to happen. And so that's really out of reach for most people. Secondly, you've got, or like on the other end is self-publishing, and there's nothing wrong with self-publishing. It's great. I mean, you do it, talk about it. I mean, it's lots of your authors, I'm sure, self-published authors. Nothing wrong with that. In the between, there's this thing of hybrid publishing where you have a helper to help you through, kind of help you through the self-publishing process and how much help they're offering you versus how much you need and how much of the ball the publisher's carrying. You're paying for some of that, and then the publisher is potentially getting a portion of the sales, depending on what the deal looks like. I'm interested in very compelling stories and people who want to elevate their story to a certain level. So, for example, on Killing Kyle Orth, that went through, ultimately, it went through 6 stages of editing.
Well,
And
that's
when
a
we
lot.
got the book in our hands, we still found 4 mistakes.
Oh, wow.
It is so hard to get a book to that very high level. But over the course of my career, earlier in my career, and as recent as a few years ago, I was working at the kind of the A-list level, right? So I was working with people who you've heard of. And I like, not to be weird and name droppy, but there's a guy, his name is Jason Aldean, and he's a country singer. And there's this other person named Carrie Underwood, also a country singer. And I've worked with the Robertsons, the Duck Dynasty people, or and a lot of that's on the event side. But I've worked with these really big brands, national brands, and so I was the voice of Mountain Dew Kickstart, for example. And so I've worked with a lot of brands. To get stuff at that level, it takes a team and it takes a lot to get to that level. There are so many people right now writing garbage books with AI or just putting a manuscript between 2 covers, and a person can do that. Fine. It's just that's what it is. It's just not. I'm totally disinterested in putting more of that into the world. I want to help people achieve the best thing. I just was talking to somebody and they're like, my philosophy, ship it ugly. Okay, fine. No problem. That's just not what I do.
Yeah.
It's got to be at a level. So I'm interested in working with people who have a compelling story that's going to make a meaningful impact in the world. That's going to, and I'm a person of faith. And so I want I like projects that are going to advance the kingdom of God. And so I'm really oriented that way. Some of my work is, commercial in nature, but compelling stories. I love a redemption story. And Killing Kyle Orth is a perfect example of a redemption story. And that the person is willing to do the work and invest at the level of having a really good finished thing that you're proud to have it in hardcover.
Yeah. Tell us a little bit more about the book.
Killing Kyle Orth is amazing. Now it started as a documentary. So there's a guy, his name's Kyle Orth. Okay. I live in Iowa. He's a kid who's in eastern Iowa, small rural community in eastern Iowa, and he's in an abusive home. And his mother was schizophrenic, tried to kill him with a butcher knife. Dad's not in the picture. There's a stepdad. it's chaos. They move to the Quad Cities, which is on the Iowa-Illinois border. Things get worse. By sixth grade, he runs away. I have a son about to get out of school here. He's in seventh grade. It's unimaginable to me that my seventh grader would have to fend for himself on the streets, but that's how it was for Kyle. He was making it on his own on the streets by seven. How does a kid do it? How does it do it? Well, I'll tell you how. Breaking and entering is how they do it, you know? And so he fell into crime. No runaway. Every runaway is running away from something, right? We think about runaways as this feral kid. Well, yeah, but they were all running away from something, you know? And so he's breaking into people's garage and sleeping in their car or letting himself into somebody's house to get dinner or whatever. And then it's not long and he's in a placement and a foster home and a thing and then this and then he runs away from that because it's just so much turmoil and chaos. And it would come as a surprise to no one that he ended up in the criminal justice system or however you want to frame that, right? When he was 16 years old, he stole some guns. Guns are an easy thing to steal and sell, you know? And he sold some guns and they were used in a murder. A little girl got killed. And he was brought up on murder charges when he was 16. He wasn't there when it happened, but he had sold the guns. So he was in prison, tried as an adult. And then his dad died. And they took him to his dad's funeral with two federal agents in front of him. He's wearing an orange jumpsuit, handcuffs around his wrist, shackles around his legs, two prison guards behind him, and he sees himself that way. And he's also a high achiever, and so he was going to be the best at it. And for the next 2 decades, he was chaos. When he was in prison, he was a threat. And when he was out of prison, he was a threat. He's a top 1% salesperson. He found every way to build a criminal enterprise and find financial success that only poured fuel on a very dangerous fire. In Cedar Rapids, where I live, there's a famous scene where he leads the police on a high-speed chase. They back him into an alley. And once trapped, he crashes the stolen BMW that he's driving and then steps on the gas to get around the police. They open fire and they shot 26 times. 3 of the bullets found his body. And you would think that would have been the end of the story. But he survived, and things got worse. It went down from there. Rock bottom had a basement for Kyle. But the people of God saw something in him and started investing in him, even though he made that excruciatingly difficult. And because of the persistence of God and the people of God in particular, today, he's unrecognizable. He changed his name. So
Obviously.
Kyle Orth is dead. Kyle Hunter lives. Kyle Hunter is the general manager of a luxury car dealership. He's literally on city council of the town that he lives in. He is a leader in our community, serving on nonprofit boards for people, boards of faith-based organizations that help people transition out of prison and out of cycles of, destructive cycles and addiction. He also is married and has a beautiful little girl. And his wife is the executive director of a Christian charity in town. And he's on fire for Jesus and pulls people out of the life he once lived. So killing Kyle Orth is a little bit of a play on this thing of the police tried to kill him, be done with this guy. But it's really a story of dying to the old man so the new man can live, and so it's done very well. It's became an Amazon bestseller on its launch. We continue to see strong sales of the story, phenomenal reviews. People say things like, I've never liked to read. In fact, one person told us, I've never read a book in my entire life. This is the first book I will have ever read all the way through because I can't put it down. So the way we wrote the book was that the job of every sentence is to make you want to read the next sentence, right? And it's the book of an addict, And so this book is very addictive, right? People will say, I couldn't sleep last night. I had to read it before I woke up. I had to read it. I just didn't sleep last night. I had to read the book. And so it's doing very, very well. And so That's probably like the gold star of kind of projects that I have going right now in that category. I'm working on my own book that I've been working on for a long time. It's called Acorns and Oaks, and it's about recording your story and living from a place of legacy.
That's amazing. I talk a little bit about legacy in some of my work too. So yeah, I think it's important, especially if, I mean, I don't have kids, but especially if you have kids, right? So,
Yeah, and I think legacy is very misunderstood. We think about legacy as a thing you leave. You leave a legacy.
mhm.
Kinda. But the legacy is really the story of your life and how it's imprinted on the people around you. You're creating your legacy today. Legacy does not start when you die. Legacy is happening right now. It's just that we're writing that legacy story and how we live today. And so, because I'm writing the book and I've done the research, I'm super into this stuff and I help people record their stories. I have observations because I'm a heritage and legacy filmmaker and help people with books. And so I'm I'm able to observe people who have that kind of intentionality with their life. And through this observation and then later research, I found that only about 7% of people think about their legacy often, at least once a week.
Mhm.
Only 7% of people. 16% of people never think about it. Literally never. It wasn't even on their mind. They've never considered it. It's not on their mind whatsoever. Most of us fall somewhere in between.
Right.
But the people who live with legacy in mind, they live totally different lives than the rest of us. Totally different lives. Lives of incredible impact and incredible intentionality. And so the question gets to be, well, how would you shift it? What would I do to shift into the 7%? How would I rewire my brain to do it? And the answer is record your story. Because the effort it takes to write the book or do the film and the introspection, and it's a lot of work, and it causes you to look back at your heritage. How did I get here? What led up to me? What led up to now? What are all the factors? And what do I want it to look like going forward from here? That's legacy, right? And so the effort and act of doing that is the thing that we can affect that causes us to live from a place of legacy. Once you do it, nothing's the same. Everything's different after you've done it. I
Yeah.
think everybody who's listening who has done it, who's written a memoir, done a heritage and legacy film or something like that, they would agree. Oh, yeah, it was before that and after that. After that, everything was different.
Yeah. And that's so true. Like ever since I wrote my book, everything is different. And I think about it a lot more too, because you never know who you're going to impact and who's going to learn from you or change from what you taught them or who they can impact as well. So,
Absolutely. And so part of the reason that I'm writing the book is to, you know, encapsulate all that thought and expand on that quick little thing I just shared here on your podcast. Like, let's expand on that. Let's tell some stories, but also let's literally tell people how to do it. Because even though you could hire me or somebody like me to make a film about your family, it's going to cost at least $3,500. A lot of these cost $10,000 to $50,000, depending on how many cities do we have to go to, how much, how many days are we going to shoot? What's this going to be? Like spending a week with you? Am I spending, who knows, right? But you're going to spend at least $3,500. There are so many people who have such amazing stories, but that's not within reach for them, financially. That's not within reach for them. But they should still do it. And it would still be very meaningful to their family if they did it. Everybody can afford to buy this book, like spend the 25 bucks. I'll tell you exactly how to do what I do, you know? So that's really the reason I'm writing the book is to help other people step into this place of living from a place of legacy. And for the sake of the generations, I think we've really fallen. This is what when I'm doing public speaking stuff, I really talk a lot about making the shift. We don't understand heritage and legacy, and we have lost a lot of intergenerational exchange. We are living not in the moment. People like talking about live in the moment. We're not living in the moment. We're living in the momentary. And we've all fallen into this little hole that's about the width of your phone and the height of your phone. And we've kind of as a filmmaker, I would say the past has faded to black, and we have at most a very fuzzy focus on the future. We're living in the momentary, we're living in the scroll, and we've lost intergenerational exchange. We need to restore that. And I think that recording our stories and sharing our stories intergenerationally can be pretty sensational for families and for the generation to come. We have the anxiety generation. How do we battle that? It's people who've come before saying, like, I know it's hard right now. Trust me. Trust me. It was hard in the past too, and we made it. We're here.
Right. Yeah, I think a lot of information has been lost, like you said, because um, you know, everybody's just putting their folks or grandparents in old folks' home and kind of forgetting them there, right? And they don't talk to them. They don't learn what they've learned over the centuries or know from all the years they've lived and thrived. And I think that is getting lost because no one hears those stories.
Right. And it's so important to share the stories. So I want to be an encouragement to people to do the hard thing. Share the story, tell the story, record the story, share the story, share those stories. We think we get so caught up in the tyranny of the urgent and the consumption of this crazy time that we live in. And we do live in a crazy time, right? But there's been some crazy times in the past. I I'm making a film. I've been working on it for over a year now about the town of Estherville, Iowa. It's in northwest Iowa, and it's a town of about 6,500 people. And I've been working on this documentary. I'm working with a community leader there, and so in working on it, I went to their little history museum. It's at their little state fairgrounds, and they've got a little metal building, and they've got, a big stack of old newspapers. So I went to this far back as it would go. What's the oldest newspaper you have? And I pulled it out. And we think about the political rhetoric and how hot the political rhetoric is right now, right? And it's hot for sure. And so forgive me. And so, you know, it can be said, and people are saying, it's never been like this. It's never been this insane. It's never been this hot. Well, we've never had exactly the set of conditions we do, like AI. But when I pulled out that oldest newspaper, the headline story, the top of the page, was that the townspeople had just hung their city council. Now, that's some hot political rhetoric where everybody gets so mad at the city council that they killed all of them and hung them in the town square. And
Okay.
they were super racist about it. They were like, somehow some ethnic minority had become the city council and everybody killed them, right? We've just lost. That's all lost to history. The other thing, as I was reading through these newspapers, all the time their downtown would burn down. We never worry about that. We never worry that downtown is going to burn down and everybody in town is going to have to show up with buckets of water and try to put out the fire that's burning down downtown. So yes, it's crazy right now. There's war and rumors of wars. We have unbelievable corruption in our political system. And it was also this way in the past. It's just that we get consumed with the anxiety of today, and it might be reassuring to us to know, hey, man, it's bad, but it was bad before, and we made it, and we're going to make it again.
Right. Yeah. And I think if people don't watch the news, it helps a lot because for me, I don't watch the news and I focus on mindset and motivation and I don't see or feel any of that stuff, right? So it's what you
Good for
focus
you.
on.
Well, that I have an intern who's starting here this summer, and she's a happy kid, and one of the projects that we have coming up is going to involve a lot of work on social media. And I said, Mackenzie, how familiar are you with the platforms? And she's like, not at all. I don't have them. And it's like, what? Now I know why you're so happy.
Right? Yeah. Well, and you know, the social media algorithms, like they only feed you what you watch, right? So, yeah, it just feeds me mindset and motivation stuff. So I'm happy.
There's something to be said for that, for sure. Yeah. Yeah. So I think our stories are really important. I think getting our stories recorded helps. As a matter of fact, I think it helps refine, codify, solidify, clarify mindset and motivation because we hear ourselves saying it. We get pretty sure about what it is that we mean to say. And we get an opportunity to say it and hear ourselves say it. And then we get the opportunity to say it to whoever is meaningful to us. One of the things that happens, I think, as we get older is we have things we want younger people to be able to hear, and we just don't know how to create the moment to say the thing that we really want to be able to say. So when you record your story, creates that moment, whether it's through a documentary film or a journal or a book. It creates the moment to say the thing to the people who you love that you really want them to know that you love them, how
Mhm.
much they mean to you, and what you want for them, you know?
That's impactful.
Yeah.
So, I just have a personal question for myself. So I'm a writer, right? I'm not a public speaker. I'm trying to be, but what like what suggestions would you give for writers who want to do a documentary, but they don't really feel comfortable like in front of a camera, or they don't know if they can like speak as well as they write, that kind of thing.
Well, take the risk. You know what I mean? We didn't most of us who are good writers, we didn't start out as good writers. We learned how to be good writers. You know, we might have had some natural gifting, we might have had some ability as a storyteller, but you just don't automatically have good grammar and syntax, and you don't automatically know how to structure a story. You just learn how to do it. And so, a lot of these things can be taught, and that means that we can learn them. And there's so much to be said for being uncomfortable and doing it other anyway, right?
Hmm.
You don't have to be comfortable. You have to be courageous,
Right.
and not having that like Tony Robbins level of polish is fine. Like being vulnerable with an audience is endearing. People appreciate that, and opening line like, hey, you could probably tell by looking at me, I'm not a public speaker, I'm a writer. So I wrote this thing that I want to share with you, and I committed it to memory because I'm a writer, but not a public speaker. So will you give me some grace? I'm not a public speaker. I'm a writer. I wrote this book, and here's what I said in that book. I said, on and on and on, right? And so it sets you up to do that. It happens that for me, something unlikely happened when I was in the 6th grade in Des Moines, Iowa. You, Stacy, and I might be old enough to remember. There was this thing called television before we had these phones that fed us a feed on demand all the time, the dopamine drip that we're all addicted to. There was this other thing called television. And on the television, when you'd come home from school, if you were like me and you went to school in the 1980s and the 1990s, you'd
Hmm.
come home from school. And on some days, there was an after school special. And these after school specials were these little films that had a very moral message. And unbelievably, in Des Moines, Iowa, where I was raised, they filmed a series of these after school specials. And when I was in the 6th grade, I was cast in one of those films. And it would come as no surprise to anyone that I played the nerd. And it was not a stretch. And the film I was in, Stacy, was called Together. And so if you want to know the very moral message of that movie, it's that if you're having a hard time doing something on your own, you should try doing it together. And so I was in this film in sixth grade, and it kind of took me behind the scenes of like, that's how they make this stuff. That's how this works, right? I got paid $300. I loved. I thought it was so amazing. There's cameras, and that day the big Betamax cameras, and they had an RV for us with air conditioning and these out on these railroad tracks. It was amazing. Thing. And then when I was 14 years old, another highly unlikely thing happened to me. And it's that I got a radio show. Because there was also, before there was Spotify and Pandora and whatever, all these things, there was this other thing that was called radio. And back in those days, the radio was a big deal because you only had the newspaper, the television, and the radio. And I got a radio show, and I was 14 years old. By the time I was 16 years old, I had a morning show in Des Moines, Iowa. I had a morning show every day before I went to high school from 6 a.m. to 8 a.m. I was on the air for 2 hours playing this new kind of music that had come out called alternative music. And if you lived in Des Moines, Iowa, and you wanted to listen to Pearl Jam and Nirvana and Stone Temple Pilots and Soundgarden and all these kinds of bands, you had to listen to a stupid high schooler talking between the songs. And I was terrible, but I had a show. And that led me to getting a job at WHO Radio in Des Moines, Iowa, which is where Ronald Reagan got his start. So who knows where I could end up? It won't be the White House, I can tell you that. And then that led me to starting the country's all digital student run radio station at Waldorf College in Forest City, Iowa. It was the first all digital student run radio station in America. That's one of my claims to fame. And that led me to going to Oxford to finish up my college and having an air shift on a BBC affiliate. My accent was appealing in England the way that the English accent is appealing here in America. And so that led on to me getting a career in the media. My wife was a TV person, and so I was in radio. She was in television, and we very quickly burned out. We burned out. In the media, you can either be really good at your job or you can have a healthy marriage. And we decided we wanted to be married to each other. We quit our job. We sold everything we owned. And we traveled full time, executing events all over the United States. Think Oscar Mayer Wienermobile, although we didn't do the Wienermobile. We lived in hotels and went to different cities. Worked for the Cartoon Network and for NCAA. Did the March Madness events and did stuff like that for a couple of years. Settled down, and then I stayed in that world and kind of went into media. My wife went into real estate, and so it's just been a life for me of media marketing experiences, events, and then. All that to say, using my voice and speaking is what I've always done. It's very comfortable for me because it started when I was a kid, having the lead in the elementary school play. I've just always been a person who can talk, which doesn't help you as a writer. But some people have that natural orientation, and then it's been crafted over the course of their life, and it's been reinforced over the course of their life. Whereas for so many people, what's really reinforced for them is shh, shh, shh. And I'll push back on that and say, no, you were given a voice for a reason. You have been given this life for a reason. Share what it is that you have to share through the mediums that you're called to share them. And that might be standing in front of a group of people and talking to them, connecting with them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's important to share your story, however that may be, whether it be a book or a movie, right?
Yeah. Or standing in front of a room full of people as a speaker,
Exactly.
or one-on-one over coffee. There's something to be said for these one-on-one deeper relationships and that type of exchange that can happen with a couple friends on a couch or something like that too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, agreed. Do you have anything else to share with the audience before we close out?
I would just say that we often want to diminish ourselves. We're often, even if we don't want to diminish ourselves, we do. We diminish ourselves. I have a friend and her name is Dixie. And when I started Fascination Film Studio, she said what so many people say to me. She said, Tej, you have no idea how much I wish we had done this when my mom was still alive. People say that to me all the time. Dixie's probably, I don't know, 70? And I said, Dixie, what about you? because Dixie was a public school teacher and she is so loved by everyone here. She's had so much impact on so many lives, not only her family, but so many lives. Everybody loves her. She's amazing. And what she said was, "Oh, no, not me. We can't do that. We can't do that." As much as she wishes she'd done it when her mom was alive, that's exactly how much other people wish we would do it, or that they just don't know. They just don't make the connection. They just think there's still time. There's going to be time. Sometimes there's not time.
Yeah,
So tell your story, record your story. Don't delay.
agreed.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so very much for being on my show. I love what you're doing, and I think that you're doing amazing things with the legacy documentaries and publishing. That's amazing. So, how would people get a hold of you or your book or your film studio?
Sure.
How do they get a hold of you?
FascinationFilms.com. I use Fascination Film Studio because there's a Fascination Films over in Europe that makes a very different kind of film than the type I make. They find something else fascinating. So if somebody looks that up, they're like, "Wait, Stacy, who'd you have on your show?" Fascination Film Studio, fascinationfilms.com. I'm pretty easy to find on social media. I'm pretty active on LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram. So there's not a lot of Tej Stofers floating around out there. So I'm probably the only Tej you'll meet all day.
Yeah, I agree. Well, thank you so much for being a guest. And I will also put your links in the podcast notes so that people can find you. And everybody, if you enjoyed the show, please remember to subscribe and share with your friends so we can have more amazing authors and entrepreneurs on the show. Until next time, good day.